Sweep the League is back, and we are back with a bang. We are joined again by Mr. Daniel Kelly, first round mock, Mr. First Round Mock himself. Before we get to Daniel here and talk about the position of wide receiver coming up in this NFL draft, we got to give a shout out to one of our sponsors here, SpecialLeaf.com, Special Leaf Olive Leaf Tea. Again, you got to go get it. Go to their website, www.specialleaf.com. You've got the 4 flavors that we've been screaming about: pomegranate blueberry, tangerine ginger, hibiscus blueberry, and the original flavor itself. It's 100% natural, all ingredients, no added sugar. It's energy boosting compounds without the use of caffeine. It's a miracle drink in itself. It's Special Leaf. Go to www.specialleaf.com. Again, this is another NFL draft episode. As soon as the draft gets a lot closer, you're going to have a lot more content. Right now, we're just kind of trying to break down some positions for you. Today, we're going to get into the wide receiver position with first round mock zone Daniel Kelly. Daniel, first and foremost, welcome back to Sweep the League. We enjoyed having you back the first time. We brought you back. We're going to bring you back so many more times. How you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing really well, Rudy. I really appreciate the first time I was on, and I appreciate the comeback route for the no pun intended, as we talk about receivers tonight, coming back for a second time around here. And this is a stacked wide receiver class in the 2023 NFL draft. And in fact, this is a very deep class of receivers and one of the deepest positions for teams coming up here in the draft.
Yeah, wide receiver class definitely is huge in this draft. And that's kind of something that I mentioned to William Giannis, because we did an episode with him on the tight end position. And even the tight end position is stacked. I love that we're seeing this draft kind of just overflow with positions where you really can't get a bad guy in a lot of the rounds. I mean, you're going to have some really good gems that we're going to get into as well. Some guys in that mid-round area where you're going to get some great value. But nonetheless, man, let's jump right into this wide receiver class. I mean, you've got the love for guys like from the, media and analysts galore and the big 4-letter networks everywhere. You've got Jackson Smith and Jogba out of Ohio State. You've got them talking about Quentin Johnston out of TCU. Not only that, you've also got Jordan Addison out of USC. Those are the 3 guys that you hear a lot of. You're starting to hear pickup about Josh Downs out of North Carolina. The greatest go out there, obviously, because I'm a Tar Heel fan. So Josh Downs is getting a lot of love out there. But you've got other guys who are getting first round love from first round mock. Give me some guys out there, and they could be the same guys that I mentioned, but also give me some other guys, because you've got a guy in there that I absolutely love, and he's out of Wake Forest. Who is that guy?
That guy is my wide receiver one, WR1, headed into the 2023 NFL draft, Rudy. And to those who are listening, and you're right, it's a man by the name of A.T. Perry out of Wake Forest. And I tell you what, it's kind of funny. When I watch game film, and this probably comes from watching for about 41 years now, but certain names of guys will go through my head as I'm watching. They like who this prospect reminds me of, and the names that kept going through my mind were pretty names with a pretty high regard in NFL circles. Guys like C.D. Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Al Toon, Keyshawn Johnson, Des Bryant. These are the names that are going through my mind, watching A.T. Perry play. And he's not getting much love at this point. I think, NFL mock draft database.com, a great source to go to kind of see what the NFL draft platform community is feeling about players. They kind of pull everyone together. And I think when I put my article out about Perry, only 4.1% of the NFL draft community had him with a first round grade. I absolutely love this guy. He plays the game, with a defensive mentality, and that's something I really love about him. He's a guy that's very dynamic. on game film. He's kind of got that show off star power type of quality to him. You know, when Des Bryant, you know, put the popcorn in his face and all, you know, he's kind of got some of that to him. Yeah. You know, he's good and he lets you know it. You know, when he beats the defense, he's a guy that's as a receiver, he's good at all three route levels. And the thing that I love about him is that he's very physical. Okay. And he's somebody who just flat out can bully corners and drive them off the ball. And you know, it's something like I wrote in my article. You know, he gets rid of defensive backs like you or I or one of our listeners would, you know, like use a fly swatter in the kitchen. You know, and he just get out of here, you know, and he's very handsy, he's very physical. So he's able to beat corners and matchups by either just flat out being too physical for them, or he's somebody that can, you know, basically he's got this really crisp ability to change directions at the route break point. And that's going to be an issue too and a problem for defenses in the NFL. And he's a guy who can take the top off a defense. And that's what you look for. I mean, in a true X, you know, line up on the line of scrimmage type of guy, you know, that alpha receiver, if you will, that's what I look for as a guy with that true deep speed too. I think he's recorded at 4.48. We'll see if there's any more data heading into the draft on that. But in the thing that makes him so dangerous, really, outside of the things I've talked about, Rudy, is that because he has this physicality to him, and because he has that deep speed quality, and because he, you know, those elements, he's able to drive. You know, corners respect him a lot on game film. He's able to drive corners off the ball into his routes, and so he can basically, and he can change direction so quickly. He can just kind of like fly down the field and just slam on the brakes in a comeback route, and boom, ball's right there. I think this guy is going to own the intermediate route level in the NFL. I think he's going to be a huge surprise for a lot of people who have been following the mainstream national narratives on a guy that, you know, you mentioned at the top of the show about a Quentin Johnston. Listen, Quentin Johnston cannot hold this guy's cup of Gatorade.
Nice. And that's saying a lot, because Quentin Johnston was getting a whole lot of love this year. For a while there, I even had Quentin Johnston as wide receiver one. As I'm looking at more game film, as I'm looking at more receivers, I understand, you know, I'm dropping him, you know, not quite a bit, but I am dropping him in favor of a lot of other guys. I mean, I did see a lot of film on A.T. Perry recently. I did watch him because, you know, it is Wake Forest and they do play in the ACC. So I do watch a lot of ACC football, and I saw great things out of A.T. Perry. And you're right. I think wide receiver one is definitely the way to go with A.T. Perry. He screams like that guy that you must have. Another ACC guy is one guy that I know all too well, and that is Josh Downs. And for me, I'm not seeing a lot of love for Josh Downs. I really don't understand why, because this kid is amazing, isn't he?
He really is, Rudy. You know, not many guys in game film excite me. You know, I mean, it's just a lot of guys are like watching paint dry. They're just guys. You just got to kind of just power through the game film and power through the evaluation, and you know, hope you don't see a whole lot of them going forward. You know, but that's not the case with Josh Downs. You're exactly right. I mean, this guy, he's gonna destroy NFL secondaries. He's gonna wreck NFL defenses, like I titled my article on FirstRoundMock.com. It just, and the reason I talk like that, this is the way I would talk if I was in a war room as a scout or an executive or something. It's he just does so many things so well that you know, it's just very noticeable that shows up about Downs. You know, I think that, you know, the biggest thing he brings to the table is just a razor sharp change of direction at route break points. And that's really what you're one of the key things you're looking for in game film. And why is that important? Because defensive backs and corners try to, of course, match receivers. The receiver knows where he's going, but the corner doesn't, right? so it's like he's running, and the corner's kind of guessing at times and trying to read the body language and the route and which way he's going to go and so forth. But Downs has this ability that he can just boop, he can break off routes so quickly, and the acceleration he has and shows going into his routes and coming out of his routes. I mean, this guy can flat out slam on the brakes and then hit the gas pedal and get back to full speed in a heartbeat. And that's going to make him extremely tough. I mean, it's going to make it tough for a Sauce Gardner to cover this guy. Let's put it in perspective, who I think is a top corner in the NFL right now. And I talked about him being the top corner even before he played a down of football in the NFL, recently selected as Defensive Rookie of the Year for the New York Jets. I think even he's going to have a tough time with this, because when you have a receiver that can change direction that quickly, it's really, really hard. It's hard on a defense to cover a guy like that. And he's very good at, because of that, he creates these huge throwing windows, for the quarterback to throw through. He's really good at setting corners up and keeping them guessing what he's going to do. And the guy's got great hands. I mean, that's the name of the game, right? Receivers having great hands.
100%.
That's what it's all about. We look at size and all this craziness. It's all these measurables, and that has a place in the evaluation process. But the reality is, can he catch the ball? And whereas a Quentin Johnston, for example, put up a 57% catch rate, which is a huge concern, out of TCU. The guy has very unnatural hands. The guy you mentioned, Johnston, he double clutches a lot. He body catches. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Josh Downs. Josh Downs is the guy that's got great hands, a 78% catch rate this last season, up from 69%. So he's showing, in 2021, so he's showing a better production and catching more passes thrown to him, which is great. He shows great concentration no matter how tight the coverages are. He can high point the ball. I think this guy, I'm not going to sit here and say he's a number one receiver on an NFL team, but I think that he is just an incredible number two that you bring in. And I mean, if you were to pair him, like say with the Tennessee Titans with a Treylon Burks, I think it would be frightening.
We're talking to Daniel Kelly, first round mock. Definitely go to the website, check it out, and also follow Daniel on Twitter. It's at first round mock. Great content as always putting out some great content, great prospects. And he's definitely giving you the grades as far as who's going to be those first round guys. We're talking wide receivers here. The one guy you mentioned to me, and I want to ask the question because people don't get a whole lot of this guy. And I understand the injury concern, and that's one Jackson Smith-Njigba out of Ohio State. It's weird because when I go through my prospects, I'm looking at, okay, why do I have Jackson in the first round? Well, I mean, he checks off a lot of the boxes, but then it goes to, well, we didn't get enough game from him this year, which is true. So it checks off an even bigger box. What is it that people need to look at for Jackson Smith-Njigba to say, okay, this is the receiver that we see in that first round where we can pick him? Because again, when you're looking at a fan's perspective outside of the analysts and everything like that, you're like, there's no way that this guy should be a first round pick. But you got to look at just more than what him not doing off the field where he was injured. You got to do what he's done on the field, but also his mechanics as well. So I want to give you that question that I've gotten from a lot of people who are fans looking in and saying, why is Jackson Smith still getting love?
That's a great question, and I really, dug into this one quite a bit because of, the injury concern, with the hamstring. And of course, there was people out there that said, question, should he have played? Was he just waiting for the NFL? What happened? So, and those are valid concerns. So I went back and I watched 8 games of him. I mean, I really dug into this guy. And to me, it's like, again, we go back to what makes a great receiver in the NFL, and some of the characteristics that make him great. And this guy has just elite flexibility. Okay. I mean, one of my nickname for him, I come up with nicknames too for some of these guys. my nickname for him is Gumby, right? Because he's got this this incredible bend and flexibility to his body, the way he moves and his routes and the way he moves on the field and stuff. And the other thing too is that, he's another guy. He's got hands made out of glue. I mean, this is a guy that, has caught 110 out of 135 passes over 3 seasons at the Ohio State, right? Mm-hmm. Hands made out of glue. He's phenomenal setting up corners. Again, we talked about that just previously when we're talking about Downs. Now we're talking about it again with Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's great at setting up the corners, and he has just, when you watch the game film, he has just a knack. I mean, I can see it with my eyes closed as I'm speaking right now. I can see the game film in my mind's eye, and he has just a knack for finding the soft spots in the coverages, and for finding those weak areas and exploiting the weak areas in the coverages and getting open. And he's got the quick, choppy feet. He's very, he can snap off routes, like you snap a twig. He can do that, and he can make a defender miss after the catch. Now, make no mistake, this is not a guy that's going to be a deep threat in the NFL, and that's one of the biggest things, the biggest knocks on him, quote unquote. In his catch radius is so, and some of that stands out. Decent, not great straight line speed, but he does have that short area burst. And so when you look at this is a guy I feel is going to absolutely dominate the intermediate route zone in the National Football League again, because corners, they're going to have a tough time covering him. He's just somebody that knows how to get open. I mean, if and this is going to be funny, Rudy, because the teams are going to, this is going to be a guy that's probably going to drop into the 20s range, in the first round, towards the end of the first round, because of these concerns, and they're valid. I mean, they are valid. I mean, teams have to take the stuff into account. Obviously, there's going to be, a pre-draft medical work, workups done and stuff and all that. But if he falls into the 20-something range or something, it's terrifying to me to think about how maybe the Minnesota Vikings pick up this guy later in the first round and pair him with a Justin Jefferson, or, if Buffalo gets him and puts him with Stephon Diggs. I mean, this is going to be a huge. I mean, it's gonna be great for fantasy football. Don't get me wrong, but it's gonna be just an absolute nightmare for NFL defenses, and every team that passes on a Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think is really going to regret it, because truly of all the receivers I've seen, this stood out. I mean, when I watched last year, I was watching Garrett Wilson, who was my WR1 heading into the draft last year. I watched Chris Olave, and I watched all these different people there. When I was watching the 2021 game film, even, I kept saying to myself, who's this number 11? Who's this guy? Because he looks like he's better than all the rest of them on the field. And he just has that ability as a receiver that's just really special. And I think he's going to make a tremendous impact for whichever team is fortunate enough to land him.
Yeah, we are talking with Daniel Kelly again, a first-round mock, giving the love to the wide receiver class coming into this year's NFL draft. So the one thing I want to just ask you real quick, and it's a real quick thing about Jackson Smith there, is do GMs really, are they going to really shy away because of the injury? Because last year we had a similar situation, not exactly the same, but similar, when the Lions ended up taking Jameson Williams. And it's kind of like, okay, we saw Williams come back towards the end of the year, stuff like that. They probably may have had other options to go with, but would that same concern affect Jackson? Because like you said, him dropping to the 20s would benefit a team like Minnesota, who is kind of in uncertainty with Adam Thielen. They could definitely use him next to Justin Jefferson. You mentioned Buffalo. I mean, dare we say that it gets even scarier because you could pair him with a Kansas City Chiefs offense, which we already know what Patrick Mahomes can do. So do they have those concerns like they did last year with Williams being drafted by the Lions at kind of a pretty decent a pretty decent pick, knowing that he had the injury already, thinking this year, okay, Jackson was hurt pretty much the entire year. Do we want to take that chance?
Yeah, and it's a good question. I mean, and we saw the same thing a little bit with George Pickens too last year. Out of Georgia, like where was he? What was going to happen with him too? And I don't think the injury is anywhere near as severe as what happened. As far as a general manager looking at this from their perspective, as a Jameson Williams, who everybody knew was coming off a pretty serious injury. The hamstring thing. I mean, a lot of players in the NFL have hamstring issues on a regular basis, and again, teams will do their background work on him. He's one of these guys that, a lot of teams are probably going to find a reason to pass on him, or they're going to talk themselves out of it. That happens a lot for whatever reason. And some teams just going to say, like in the 20 range, they're just going to say, maybe even the Giants or something are like, wow, this is sitting here. But it all depends on the philosophy of the general manager, what their experience has been, how badly they've been burned with players that have been hurt in the past. If anybody thinks it's going to be a reoccurring hamstring injury, that's a different problem. That can be, you miss significant playing time here and there, but it's going to be interesting because without playing a whole lot this last season, teams are definitely going to discount that, and probably rightfully so. But somebody, when you're a playoff team, when you're sitting in the 20s, in that range right there, I mean, it's you're just missing a piece or two or three. This it's like a puzzle, putting a puzzle together, and Jackson Smith and the Jigma is a championship piece to some team's puzzle.
There you go. That's a lot of the questions are being answered by Daniel Kelly when it comes to Jackson Smith and Jigba out of Ohio State. I mean, the concerns there are injury, and he's right. Some GMs may stray away from it. They may say, no, we're not going to take a chance on it. But that also kind of attests to the type of wide receiver class that we have this year, because you're able to pass on a Jackson Smith and be like, okay, the injuries are concerning, but yet I still have, maybe a Josh Downs right there, maybe, a Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee. I mean, you still have other options where you can say, okay, I'm passing on a solidified receiver, a great receiver, but I'm standing here and I've got, Zay Flowers staring at me. And I'm like, okay, I can probably go that route. But nonetheless, give me a gem here. One guy that we definitely know is not going to go in the first round. He's probably going to go middle part of the draft, but is an impact type player who can come into the league and maybe be that number 2 wide receiver on an NFL team looking for that second guy.
Yeah, the guy I really like, and I think he's going to fall, into the 3rd, 4th round, somewhere in that area, is Cedric Tillman. Out of Tennessee. This is a guy that I compare to a Hines Ward 2.0. If you will, he's a very there's a lot I like about him. He's got the 2 things I like most about him are his hands and his toughness. He's a thick receiver. He's sturdy. He's built. He's muscular. He's real good. With that toughness, he's real good on the inside slants, the intermediate comebacks, and he's got this deceptive speed about him that if you don't fall asleep on Cedric Tillman as an NFL defense. Because he'll sneak behind you and he'll catch you when you least expect it, and he knows how to work corners. This is a very crafty receiver, a very polished route runner, a guy who knows how to get behind a secondary, knows how to play and manipulate a secondary, knows how to kind of set corners up, and I mean this guy plays college football like a 10-year veteran in the NFL. Okay, so this type of guy is really exciting to me, and I'll say this: I've watched I've dedicated a couple days of my life of watching Jalen Hyatt on game film, just like I do all these guys, and I would take Cedric Tillman over Jalen Hyatt 7 days a week and twice on Sundays.
Nice. There you go. There you have it, man. Absolute great analysis from Daniel Kelly here, first round mock, and I love it because I mean, Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt, I love both guys. I'm going to look at more film on Cedric Tillman. Definitely want to look at more on Jalen Hyatt, but definitely I could see Cedric Tillman being that that mid-draft gem in the mid rounds. Another guy that I kind of like that you've actually did look into a little bit here. I'm kind of on the Rashee Rice train a little bit here for SMU. I for whatever reason, I have this dream where I'm asleep at night. I wake up and I'm seeing the Falcons drafted Rashee Rice in that middle part of the pack. For Falcon fandom out there, because it's probably not going to happen. They never do what I emailed them all day and I begged them to draft people and pick up these guys. And for whatever reason, I guess my stuff is in the spam folder, so they don't ever get it. But if you have a Falcon fan or any team out there, give us a little bit on Rashee Rice out of SMU.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, if you're dreaming about these guys, you're doing this too much of this. Because that happens to me too. I wake up, I'll tell my wife, I'll be like, do you know I had this dream and it was and she'll be like, was it about football? I'm like, yeah. She's like, okay, we don't need to talk about this. But it's a Rashee Rice is a guy that I just can't get into on game film. I see him a little bit differently than you, and that's okay because, as I always say, it's not about being right; it's about getting them right. So, I'll be interested to talk with you about this one offline too, and maybe not seeing something, but the game film I've seen, over the last 2 years, I'm not seeing any dominant traits that translate to the NFL on this guy on his game film. Mm-hmm. And over 2 straight seasons, I'm talking about, and also, the percentage of passes that Rice, caught, fell off a cliff really from 2021 to 2022. His catch rate fell off the cliff. He went from 81% catch rate in 2021 down to 61% this last year. And he's a guy that, I'm not seeing it. The real problems I think began for me at the intermediate to deep route levels. He did not look explosive in his release. He didn't do a good job of achieving route leverage against corners. His running looked labored. He didn't look like he was even going full speed. To me, he looked really, really raw. He didn't show any dominant traits, like I said. At the beginning of one game I watched, he 6 passes in a row that were intended for him, he dropped. It's a huge concern I have now. I do know that, this is, I've heard the name a lot, and this is going to be one of these guys this year that's going to get a lot of play, because of the size or whatever, the 6'2", 203, and I've already had a few battles on social media over this guy. I'm not seeing it with Rashee Rice at this point, and everything we do at First Round Mock is driven by game film and game film study, and I've probably looked at let's see, about six plus games on him over the last 2 seasons.
And I'm actually gonna surprise the hell out of you here, because I say I dream about Rashee Rice, and I didn't really mean in the sense that I dream about him in a good way. I just dream that for whatever reason, I've seen his name so much. I've seen his game. I've just seen him everywhere, and I've seen a lot of love for him. But exactly what you said is the reason why I don't really want him a part of the Falcons or the roster, because I just don't see the mesh there. I don't really like what I see. Now, don't get me wrong. Size and athleticism, plus, check mark. He's got a ball. He's a ball hawk. He can grab the ball. He can get it. I know he has his drop problems, but his skills with the ball are fantastic. So he's got some good traits in him, but the biggest difference that I see that a lot of people may not see is that he's a college football player. He's not an NFL football player. That's where it separates for me. He does things at the college level well, to where if you put him in an NFL offense, I don't see it working at all. The NFL game is way faster. Everybody knows that. So he's more like a route runner who is going to get you the dink and dunk and stuff like that. Nothing to where it's ever going to translate, downfield. Nothing that's ever going to be big playability, anything like that. So that's why I'm like thinking it's probably got to be a nightmare that I'm seeing Rashee Rice. But maybe it's because I watched a lot of film on him and he's just stuck on my head. But you're right. He's a guy that's going to get a lot of love. And I'm going to be in the back kind of where you are. Like, why are you getting all this love? There's always those prospects where you're like, you don't really need to be getting all this love, but you're going to get it. And you're going to get drafted. You're going to get a decent contract. You're going to get a shot. I just don't know where he fits in the NFL. And that's my biggest question is, can his transition to the NFL be a good one and be productive? He's a college player to me. I hate to say it, but he's just a college player. He's not one that should make a starting NFL roster. Maybe fifth receiver on the board on most cases, like on the depth chart, possibly. I mean, maybe good on the special teams, but I don't see him on the NFL roster like top 3, top 4 receivers. And I don't know if that's something that maybe you've seen in some of the game film, but I just don't see how his game translates to the NFL.
That's a great point. I don't see it either. I'm not seeing it whatsoever. I mean, if I was an NFL GM, I wouldn't bring the guy to camp as an undrafted free agent. I mean, his game film is that bad that I watch, and I'm the only draft, to my knowledge, the only draft service, out there that actually, puts the links to the games right on the reports. I believe very strongly in accountability. So this is not just some guy if you're just tuning in, like, some guy shooting from the hip with just saying a bunch of bold things with nothing to back it up. No, I put the game film right on the articles. You can go to first-roundmock.com. You can type in Rashee Rice. You can look at the games and look at the same game film I'm seeing. And as God is my witness, this is what you're going to see on this guy. And you touch on an interesting point, Rudy, because there is such a difference. And I think this is something that all of us as fans need to keep in perspective, like you're mentioning, is the level of competition is another piece to the puzzle in the evaluating process. It's not the most important, but it's a piece to that puzzle. And like you talk about, when you look at a guy, how he's a good. I mean, there's a lot of great college players we've seen that have not translated to the NFL. And this could be another case like that. And to me, it was just his heart didn't look like it was into it at the college level, and now you're ratcheting it up to the NFL level, where everybody, like you mentioned, a lot faster. The game's a lot more complex, and I'm just not seeing it. If anybody wants to take a look at the articles I've read and look at the game film and tell me if I'm missing something, I really do welcome it, because at this point in my career, it's about getting them right, not about being right. And there's no pride or ego on this end. I just really want to see where the hype's coming from, and because it's not coming from the game film I've seen, and it's amazing because all the top platforms and stuff out there, a lot of the most highly traveled in that, they're all ranting and raving about this guy being, some people even see him as being 17.9% of the NFL draft community. When I last looked, I saw him as a first round pick, and that's just bewildering to me as somebody who's been in the league.
It's kind of funny because I'm going to throw a name out there, and I mean, many people may remember him, many people may not, but it takes me back to 2009 when you were seeing all this love for Darius Hayward-Bay. And it's kind of like, I get the same feeling like Rashee Rice is one of those guys that is going to get a lot of love, and, they're going to look at the positive sides. But when you get Hayward-Bay into the NFL, it's kind of like, why did he get drafted in the NFL for? I mean, oh, that's right, because he's fast. We're not going to say that about Rashee Rice pretty much, but there's going to be something that an NFL GM is like, we've got to take him. He's got to be that guy. And I don't see it. I really don't. And that's kind of the scary part. I like guys, like, Jordan Addison is obviously one of my favorite receivers here. Zay Flowers is the guy that I really am hoping that the Falcons get lucky enough to pair him alongside, Pitts in London. But I love me some Zay Flowers. One guy that I've talked to you about earlier, and I would love to get your evaluation on him when you get a chance, is Jake Bobo out of UCLA. Not a fantastic guy, but kind of like that, blue collar type worker. I mentioned more like a Danny Amendola type player, just a guy that's going to be a slot guy. He's not going to get you, over the top. He's not going to go deep down the field, nothing like that. But it's going to make life easier, kind of like a security blanket, like a tight end, where he's going to give you that 5-6 yards here and there, just get you to move the chains. That's about it. He's kind of like my Jim from UCLA. He's probably going to go undrafted. If he gets drafted, who knows? Maybe I'll get me a Jake Bobo jersey from whichever team
you should. Yeah, absolutely. You should definitely do that. That's and people be like, "Who's that?" That you can go into your story. Absolutely.
It's like getting a jersey for every draft pick that I love that may not work out. But hey, if he does, hey, I have, that draft. Kind of reminds me of in basketball. Joseph Forte from North Carolina was my favorite Tar Heel of all time, drafted in the first round by the Celtics. Didn't have a career at all. But I'm the only one that can say that owns a Celtics rookie Joseph Forte jersey that I had custom made, actually. So, I could do the same for NFL. But nonetheless, I mean, wide receiver draft class is super, super stacked. You've got, of course, you got your stars out there that are going to be, impact guys. I don't really see too many guys that are going to be like Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson coming in and just dominating the league right away. If they do, they've got to be in the right position on the right team. But nonetheless, like we both have been saying, this wide receiver draft class is super, super stacked. Daniel, I appreciate you joining me tonight, man, talking wide receiver class. Again, like I told our buddy William Yanish earlier, it's not going to be the last time we get you on as draft season gets even closer. The draft gets here. We're going to need more player analysis. We're going to get into more depth and actually pinpoint on certain players. Spend a good 20 minutes talking about certain players and getting all the info to fans out there because, of course, everybody's an armchair GM, but until they have the actual breakdowns, they really don't know. And that's where you guys come in and give these great analysts. So I appreciate you joining me here tonight.
Absolutely, Rudy. Hey, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your show. I love how you break everything down and make me a part of it. And I look forward to jumping on about some other positions as well, because there's a lot of guys to cover, a lot of ground to cover. We don't have much time to do it.
No, draft is right around the corner, man. But one thing you guys need to do, Daniel's going to have an article on Brian Bresee coming out of Clemson. I've talked about Brian Bresee with mock draft guy Peter Andreziani as well. You're going to get an article from Daniel on that, so be looking for that. Brian Bresee is one of those mystery guys, so maybe on the next time we have another Sweep the League Spotlight segment with Daniel, we'll get into some Brian Bresee talk with him. So for Daniel Kelly, again, you follow him at First Round Mock on Twitter. Head over to his website, firstroundmock.com, to get all that wonderful analysts that he gives you. Him and his writers out there do a fantastic job. So for Daniel Kelly, this is Rudy Composition until we sweep the league again next week. We'll see you guys soon.